All right. In this segment, we're going to cover three different principles: exaggeration, one; staging, two; and then solid drawing and appeal, three. The first thing we're going to cover is exaggeration, which is really important when you're animating anything, either if it's for games or if it's for TV, movies, whatever the case may be. So in our case, for video games, say you're doing a combat animation of something like a punch. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do is either film yourself, shoot reference of yourself shooting a punch, or jump over to YouTube or one of the other video sites and do a search for, a professional doing a punch, someone that is experienced and knows the mechanics of punching and the techniques, etc. Because we want our characters to look believable, unless you happen to be a pro boxer or an expert martial artist. It's always good to use reference video from the appropriate source. Sometimes we can use our shoot ourselves and it works, but sometimes for me it's always best to go to the professionals and see the subtleties and stuff in their performances that you can bring to your animation, just to give it really that extra level of believability. So let's jump over to our video reference of the punch that we were using before. Now, this really isn't the best video reference, only because it's only half the body. It's not the whole body, so we can't see at all what his legs are doing. But if we look at this and see the punch here, let's go to the second punch, which is a little bit better. If we were to copy this pose in Maya, it would be a punch, it would be believable, but it may not be as entertaining as it could be. We could have the hand up here, the body, the line of action of the body kind of at this angle here, and the punch being executed to the face. But if we exaggerate it, push, maybe lean the body even more into it, maybe stick the head out, even more, maybe drop the tilt of the head down, it'll make it for a much more interesting animation and a much more interesting move. Now, if we go back to our guy, and you can see here where I really push the exaggeration on this pose. You're not always, more than likely, if you're in this situation, you're probably not going to be winding up quite to this degree. Actually, let me undo that. There we go. Want to do it on the keyframe. Now, one of the things I like to do is really push it as far as I can until it really becomes broken, because that's really how you know when you've pushed something far enough, because it's always easier to tone a pose down than it is to kind of nudge towards a really good, strong pose. So one of the things that I learned when I was animating is, push something as far as you can, and then push it even further. Was kind of the rule of thumb that we always tried to go by. It looks like we're getting a little bit of weighting issues back there. Let's see how far we can get this bad boy. So again, you're using your reference as just that. It's reference. We don't want to be a slave to that reference. We want to use that as a jumping off point and then push it from there. Unless you're working on a mocap game, which hopefully you're not, because that takes a lot of the fun away from the animators, because the performances are already being done for you. and you're just really kind of cleaning up mocap data. But there's a lot to be said for mocap. You can learn a bit. If you work on a lot of mocap data, you can see, the arcs and stuff that the body make. Yeah, so if you're working on mocap data, you can actually learn a lot about body mechanics and how the body moves. So if you're stuck in that situation, make the best of it and see what you can learn from it is always really the best thing that you can do. I'm just seeing how far I can push this head without it really just coming apart. Yeah, I got the neck really kind of tweaked here. Okay. See, now the head's going really far under the. Let's see if I can maybe tilt the shoulders forward a little bit. Get the chin up. Again, these are the issues that you have when you're posing a character that has such odd proportions, and it's a challenge. It's definitely not really the easiest thing to do sometimes. You really have to work at it to try to get the best poses with the limitations that you have. And sometimes it can be pretty frustrating. I'm just looking for the clavicle control here. All right. So one thing I want to cover about staging. We don't have a lot of control when it comes to staging as when we're animating for games, because we don't have control of where the placement of the character is, right? It's the player controls that. So those aren't things that we always have control over during gameplay. Maybe during cinematics we have that much more control. And really the important thing with staging is directing the viewer, or in our case the player's eye, to the most important thing happening, so they're not going to miss an action. And a lot of times if you're working on a third-person game and you're working on player animation, typically the view you're going to see from your character is slightly above and behind. So you want to check to make sure all your animation is viewable from this angle, and that it's going to read really well. So now I can see back here, the arm is really getting lost with this leg here. We're getting a bit of a tangent between the two, and that means when two objects touch, they call that a tangent, and you want to try to avoid it. So you want to try to keep some negative space between the objects, so it gives a much stronger silhouette read. The arm's looking a little bit broken here on this wind up. So we might want to nudge the arm, the clavicle back a little bit. Maybe it doesn't go quite that far back. Again, these are the things. If I could, I wish I could have that arm back there, and have it read well for the animation. But he's too contorted with his specific proportions. It's not really working out. So again, here I want this arm from the player's perspective. Want it to be out away from the head, so we get this really nice silhouette that reads. If we turned off all the lights, lighting, use all lights, you can see that silhouette reads. It looks like he's winding up for a punch, or you get a pretty clear read on what all the limbs are doing. Maybe if the fist was a little stronger, it would read more like he was getting ready to throw a punch than what it is. So that's really important. thing for us to work on, as animators, is really exaggerating as much as we can and get the most we can out of the characters we're animating, and in doing so within the confines of the rigs, for those characters and the limitations that we have when working on them. So, and again through the punch, like we were showing before in that reference where he had that punch really kind of ended there. Let me pop up the video again. It was pretty straight on. If we looked at it from behind, you may see this arm, to the right of his shoulder a little bit, or it might be right in front of his face and you'd lose it entirely. So instead of ending it there, we want to have that follow through where it comes through here so the player gets a good solid read, on that punch coming through. And then it also helps to convey the sense of power in that punch. Right. And another thing too, so that's really important when we're talking about staging, is making every action read from the player's perspective. And that's really pretty challenging for game animators because you're not always sure what view you're going to be in. Sometimes camera might be here or here. You never really know. So you have to kind of go with the law of averages. Figure, okay, and this is specifically talking about player animation for a third-person style game, that, okay, this is about where the camera is going to be. And you always want to check your animation out to make sure, it's reading, from this particular viewpoint, so it's reading. And it may not look the best necessarily from the side. And, you kind of have to go with, those law of averages, and say, okay, for the most part, it's going to look the best from this angle where the player is going to see it, maybe 75% of the time. So you want those things to read. Now, if I were to do a kick, I wouldn't want to do it so his foot is right in front of me. I would probably do the same thing where, it was a roundhouse kick and it swung around, or if it was like a side kick, that his body would drop down low enough so you could see his foot up in the air, and then when he landed, it would kind of come down and around. So those are the things you really want to look for, is to make sure that the action is viewable and it reads really clearly to the player, so that happens, it's going to feel like a pretty fast punch. And then, you're going to have to animate him back to his idle pose. Typically, if this was a combo, then you would start your next animation, from this pose or wherever you wanted to, he would start that next hit, probably from there, I would think. So that's kind of it for exaggeration and staging. Solid drawing and appeal, it goes a little bit with both of those things we talked about. We're not really drawing anything, so in our case, it really means strong poses that read really well. They're very clear. You get strong silhouettes. You can see it reads pretty well. What I would like to do on this pose is maybe take that arm and try to bring it away from the head a little bit. Trying to select. Oops. All right, let's go back and get that shoulder. Go back here. And I'm pressing the 7 key, which is basically use all lights. Since there's no lights in the scene, he shows up perfectly black, but it's a great little tool for animators to quickly check their silhouettes. If I bring the arm here, I'm just trying to get some separation from the head and the arm so it reads a little bit better. So now if I do that, you're getting a little separation between that arm and the head, so that reads more as an arm, and it's pretty clear, I think, what he's doing there. Those are the things, for solid drawing and appeal. That's the things we have to work with, is trying to, make sure the pose is in balance. We've got some nice fluidity that goes through the body, and I may try to take this back pose here, bring that back to try to get a nicer curve through the back here. As you can see, that kind of is more appealing, that curve that runs through there. I'm just trying to tweak, and we're going to turn on our lights again to make sure I'm not destroying anything too badly. Let's go in here and select the arm. I might bring this back a little bit. I don't think he's going to be so much on his, quite on his toe here. That might actually be more of a side bit. Maybe it's twisting a little bit. And then let's grab that knee twist. There it is. Try to get that knee out. There we go. That's looking a lot better like that. And on this foot, maybe we do a little toe pivot here. Then roll the heel a little bit and twist it just a bit this way. Get the knee to, there we go. So again, we're really looking for a good, strong, solid line of action. So now I'm trying to get this line of action to go through here a little bit more, and then maybe we'll pull this back. I'd like a little bit more rotation in the spine. And really, you have to look at it at all angles to make sure that you're rotating the body in a way that looks good. Because in games, there's a chance the players are going to look, see the character at any particular angle. So in film or TV, you can cheat towards the camera. So say in the side view, the pose may look completely deformed, but in the camera, if it looks good, it doesn't matter. As long as the lighting doesn't give away your cheat. It's a lot easier to do that. So you're really working towards that one camera. But in games, if it's a 3D game, you really have to focus on the pose being solid and really just about any view. Again, that's really a challenge for the animator in our case. So you can see one thing my lead on DCO taught me. It's kind of a neat little thing. When you're making pose changes, say you have everything on this pose that you like. I'm basically selecting all control, saving a keyframe. Go to the next frame, save another key on everything, and then just start making some tweaks to your pose. So you're starting off at a place that you already like, but you want to see if you can push it further, and you can compare the two poses. And if you like it, save it, and then go back and overwrite your previous pose. But you can kind of continue to do this to see the progression of your pose, to see how it's coming along. And if you get to a place where, geez, I really don't like these changes, you still have your other pose saved. And you can delete your modifications without, losing the pose that you started with, which is a great thing. So that pretty much covers exaggeration, staging, solid drawing, and appeal. One other thing I wanted to talk about with appeal is to really study study other artists' work. Comic books are a great example of looking at poses that have, as long as they're done well, that have good appeal, excuse me, and flow to the pose with balance. If we just go and let's do a Google image search, and we'll do a search for, let's see, Batman. He's one of my faves. Like there's a pretty good, looks like a, Bruce Timm rip off. Maybe it is Bruce Timm, I'm not sure. Drawing, there's a good line of action in the pose. It's well balanced. It could be, maybe it could be pushed a little bit more. Again, here's one from Jim Lee. Again, nice pose. Strong hands, very, classical, a very classic Batman pose. This is one of the ones that we did for DCUO, for the character bios and stuff. Yeah, nice standing pose on both of these guys, Batman and Joker. One thing nice about Joker in this image, he's not just straight up and down, right? He's got some nice bend in his torso, which is really nice. And it's still pretty much in balance. Might be a little slightly off balance, but it reads. And Batman's pose, legs are apart. Again, there's a nice line of action and flow going through this pose. Let's go back. Just my cat. What else we got in here? Again, really nice pose here. Good, strong, solid stance, line of action. Got this lean in him. Reads pretty clearly, though this hand gets lost a little bit. But I think that's fine. Maybe if he had this hand up a little higher and he could bring this hand forward, you could get maybe a better read silhouette-wise for there. But that's still pretty awesome. Again, another classic Superman and Batman pose. That knee looks a little wonky from an anatomical standpoint. But good poses, and that's it's not always easy to come up with great poses right out of your head. So it's good to look at stuff like comics for inspiration, other animation. Okay. And not always comic books, but other animation naturally. Great poses from The Incredibles. Excellent, really nice flow throughout the pose here. These are some kind of classic, iconic, comic book type poses that they used in The Incredibles. A really good stuff. Nice twist, in the body here with the tilt of the shoulders instead of shoulders just being straight. You really want to try to show off the flexibility in the body whenever possible. Again, same with her. She's got her shoulders tilted and chest is facing this way. Hips are facing a little bit more straight towards camera. Great, just great stuff. Not all of your poses are going to be as dynamic. You may have to find some that are a little bit more subtle. Again, here, great, iconic, superhero type pose. So then you look up. Let's see what would be a good one. I do Ratatouille. Let's try up. God only knows what we're gonna get here. An old guy. But it's not just straight up and down, right? your natural tendency may have his body be perfectly straight, but they got it, at a little bit of an angle here, which is really good. The head's tilted, arms dragging down to the side. Here's another one. Legs are a little bit apart. The toes, the feet aren't perfectly. I see this a lot in student work. You always have the feet perfectly parallel. You always want to either tilt the toes out a little bit, tilt them in just to give it some, some interest. The shoulders are up, head's kind of jutting out a little bit. And again, another subtle poses. The feet are apart. One foot's facing camera, the other one's out to the side. His body's twisted just subtly. This hand's out here, the other hand's down. The head isn't perfectly straight on. It has a slight tilt. If you drew a line through it, you can see it's tilted just a little bit. And for the kid, it's a little bit small. Let's see if find some others that are a little bit bigger. Okay, here's one. Russell, again, the toes are out, the legs are apart, the chest is out a little bit, arms are out. Anything that you can do to find, look at the stuff helps to increase your knowledge of what strong poses are. And again, it could be 2D stuff. Let's see. Preston Blair. All right. So you can see in this, see full size. See the line of action in this character, how strongly that reads. You've got, these poses are designed. They're not just drawn haphazardly, but they're really thought about with elements of design and balance. You've got this arm, flowing kind of into this arm, the tail's coming out and then back up the head. So the whole thing is very well balanced, very well composed, and adds a lot more interest to your poses. So that about wraps it up, and let's move on.